So the very first question, right? It says write a function called isOdd and returns whether or not a number is odd. So there were surprisingly, I think a lot of people looked at these tests at the bottom, and they saw all the weird stuff that's going to get passed into this. Right? We saw all of this. Someone's going to pass in a 3, someone's going to pass NaN. And so there was a lot of concern, and so I actually saw quite a bit of what I would consider slightly odd code. But in reality, how do we check if a number is odd? We check if we mod it by 2, and what's it, and when is it odd? When the remainder is 1. Okay, so if we just say, hey, const is odd, I think is what's called, takes in a number, right? I saw some people put this in like as an array and stuff, right? We got to read the problem, see the test cases. We said, oh, it takes in a number. Well, we can just return. I'm doing an implicit return. Num mod 2 equal to 1. Right? So this is just like to check, like, hey, is this number in fact equal to 1? And we run it, and all the tests pass. Right? Because that's how we would generally check if a number is odd. Right? So I saw a lot of people do a lot of things really overthinking it. Right? We don't have to overthink it. This is just how we would regularly think about it. Question 2. Write a function called number of digits that returns how many digits are in a given number. Right? So this is taking in some form of number. So something I saw, so we'll have number of digits. I saw some, so it takes in some kind of number. And what I saw a lot of people do was create a for loop where they said let I equal to 0, and they did I is less than, and then they did num.length. Saw a lot of that. If a number had a length property, what would be the point of the problem? Right? We would just return number.length if that were the case. And then if we, so what we really needed, so what does have a length property? String and array. So is there a way we could convert a number into a string? Yeah, right? There's a bunch of ways we saw. So one of those ways we could just say is num.toString and return its length. So if we do that, we can run our tests, clear it, we run our tests, and all of the tests pass. Right? So this is just checking to see if it's the length. We move on, and we see disavow. So this is one that we went over the morning of the test, right? For those of you who had to take the test today, obviously you missed that slight advantage. So let's go ahead and just pump this one out. So we'll say const disavow. It took in a string. I saw a lot of splits to split it into an array, and then people wanted to use filter, and then they used join at the end. That could work, right? That will work. The one downside to that is that we are, like, if we were to write our own split, how many times do we iterate through it if we wanted to create our own? Bless you. Bless you. No problem. If I asked you to write your own split, what would you do?
You loop through, find where you want it to split, remove that one, then loop through it again, and cut at that point.
Okay. Cool. So, well, yeah, I think we could probably do it in one loop. But yeah, essentially split is you would be looping through a string. Filtering is looping through that again as an array form. Joining it, if we wanted to join, we're then looping through it again. So we're doing like 3 loops, right? When we use methods in JavaScript like split and join, although they're built in, they're not, and they're like free to type, they're not free to use in the sense of like time. It's okay at this, like at this stage in the game, we're not as worried about efficiency. But just like how we would create our own, that's what's happening under the hood. So some person, I don't know who, they're super cool, but probably they don't feel cool. But well, maybe they do. I don't know. Whoever it is super cool, but like they wrote all of these methods for JavaScript, right? They have all these tests for it, and it all works. But it still does that every single time. So every time you call join, it looks instant to us and real slick, but it's going in and actually looping through and doing all that. So if we wanted to make this slightly more efficient, we would only do one loop. So we can do that by just looping through this string. So I'm going to go ahead and say letters to avoid, and I'm going to go ahead and just make this A-E-I-O-U. I could also make these capitals, but don't feel like it for right now, so I'm just not going to. And we have letter output that we're going to need. And we can loop through that string. What's a good loop for a string? Jay? Yeah, right? So a for of loop would be really cool. So we can go ahead, because then we'll get each character instead of having to keep doing string at I, string at I. So it'll be a little bit cleaner. You can say for. A lot of people got this one right, just so you know. Like a surprising amount. Like even people who got a lot of problems wrong, they got this one right. So that's pretty cool. So I don't want to actually spend too much time on this one. Let character of the string, and we can say, hey, if so if letters to avoid dot includes our character dot to lowercase, right? I can just make it no matter what lowercase, but we really only. So if it includes it, we don't want to do anything. So what we do want to do is if it doesn't include. So I'm going to throw a not sign in the front. And I'm going to increment our output. Everybody, it seems like, wrote it like this, which was interesting to me also. Output plus character. I want to remind us that we do have syntactic sugar that I can just do plus equals. And then at the very end, we can return our output. Questions on that? Let's run it and test it. And all three questions pass. So we're in pretty good shape there. We good on that one? Okay. So we'll move on to 4, second smallest. Saw a lot of people do pretty well on this one as well. I also saw a few, like a good handful of people do second largest here, right? So they just inverted all the logic, which is like, I wish you would just read the code and walk through your lines a little bit, because all you'd have to do is take off the negative signs and switch the sign of the greater than less than. Thank you. So we can say const second smallest. This takes in an array. Whoops. And we also kind of talked about this one the day of the exam in the morning, but with finding the second smallest, we went for the second biggest string in an array. So for this one, right, we need the 2 variables, right? Again, I only actually saw one person try to sort it, so that's pretty cool that we didn't. Remember, sorting takes a little bit longer, and so we don't really want to do that in this case. So if we weren't sorting it, we would say let smallest, and we should start with the biggest number of all time, because that way we're guaranteed to be able to replace it with the next number. We'll say let second smallest, that will be negative infinity, and then we need to loop through this. So what's a good loop for this? It's a for each, right? This is a good opportunity to use the array method for each. So we'll say array for each element. And what's the first piece of logic that we care about? For feed?
If the element is less than the smallest,
Yep. So if element is less than smallest,
then the second smallest is the smallest.
Yep, so then the second smallest gets updated to be what the smallest was, and smallest gets updated to be what the current element is. We also have the situation that it's not smaller. What else do we need to check for? See, huh? Yeah, so maybe it's not smaller than the smallest, but it is smaller than our second smallest. So notice also, just like form, is I keep my element less than, and I do it in the same order on both of these. I saw some people inverse these different ones, and it becomes a lot more confusing to read as an outsider, but I imagine also for you when you're going through your code. So you really do want to try to stay consistent. Just pretend like you're just like a military sergeant, and like everything has to be the Rain Man, you know, Wapner. Okay, and we'll say we'd update our second smallest to be the element, and at the very end of this whole thing, after the for each, we just want to return our second smallest. So we'll save it, we'll run it, and all of our tests pass. So we're safe. Yeah, Shia.
When I set the second smallest to positive infinity, it still worked.
Oh, this should be in positive infinity. That's a mistake. For some reason, it didn't work, but that's probably because we're resetting our second smallest right here. So it's essentially what you assign our second smallest. It doesn't really matter if it's infinity or negative infinity, because no matter what element, it's going to be smaller than the smallest, and then second smallest will just take on that new value of infinity. It should be positive infinity, though. That would make it clean. Thank you. Good catch. Any questions on that? Yeah? All right. Cool. Let's move on to question 5. We're working our way through. This was write a function called getLocations that takes in an array of objects and returns the array of strings corresponding to the value of the location. So we can see that we have this sample input. It's this array of objects. Each object has a location and a population property. And what we're trying to get back is this array of just the locations. So what's the right array method for this? Map, right? So I saw a lot of people use for each, and that's okay, but it would be better to use map. I also saw some people use methods like filter, but they would push into it as if it was a for each. Remember, filter is going to shorten down that array and give us back the original values.
Or reduce.
Reduce, yeah, I saw yours. Reduce is good, but map is better for this because map is already putting it into that new array instead of having to do the condition, pushing it in, and then returning the accumulator. So map's just a little bit more efficient. Reduce is still something that would work. I'd probably get you a 4 out of the 5. Good question. Const get locations. So this takes in an array, and I'm going to do an implicit return and just return array.map element dot location. All right. So we can just key right into that. Check our code. And all of the question test specs pass. Any other questions on this one? Yeah, Marvin.
I just did mine a bit differently. I made a default value for, I made my get locations take 2 arguments.
That's right. I remember yours.
And I set the target to the key location.
Yeah. So Marvin did something really cool, if you don't mind me sharing. Well, yeah, you already shared it. So what Marvin did was he made his flexible, which is pretty cool. So instead of it taking in just an array, he had his take in an array and a property. Well, he wrote target, but I'm going to write property for mine. And he set a default to that property. So for this one, he set it to be location. And then that way, here he did element at property. And so if you do that, and you run the specs, it's still going to work. But I could also now, if I had my locations, I could say like get locations, and I could pass in some array, and I could also say like, oh, I actually want the population now, and then we would get just an array of populations back. So that's pretty cool. That's a flexibility thing. Definitely didn't need to do that. If you did my original answer, it's shorter, and you would still get the same number of 5 points. But it's pretty cool to throw in a little extra thing there. That was definitely like, that was a fun thing to see. Right? Don't forget, I have to grade all of these, right? So like, I looked at the same problems a lot, right? So it's pretty boring. So if you write yours in a really clean and slick way, it makes it a lot easier for me. And if you do something kind of peculiar but still good, it's kind of, then I get kind of like, I get to wake up a little. Yeah? So do it for me. Question 6. Write a function called only odd strings that takes in an array of strings as an input and filters it down so that it's only filled with odd strings. And it says we should use a high order function. High order function is just a fancy name for a function that takes in a callback. And so I gave us some options there. Which would be the best thing to use for this one?
Filter.
Okay. Marvin says filter. Anyone agree? Okay. Why? Because we're filtering it out? Yeah, okay. Yeah, I'll take that answer, right? A filter is the correct choice on this, right? Again, you can make other ones work, like reduce or for each. But filter would be the ideal choice for this. So for this, we'll say const only odd strings, took in an array, and we can just implicitly return again array.filter, where we have a string, and we want string dot length modulo 2. So if it has an even, if it's an odd number, we'll have a 1 as its return value there, which is a truthy value. And so we don't have to even check if it's equal to 1, and all the tests will pass, right? This is the same as me going equal to 1. It can only be 1 or 0. And 1 is truthy, 0 is falsy, so I'm just going to drop the equal to. Questions on this one? Okay, we are cruising along at a high altitude. Okay, question 7, the final, right? This one was interesting, slight change of pace, which I appreciated. And so it says, okay, we got to make a class called day. So the first thing we had to do was create a class called day. A lot of people did quite well on this one as well. We know that first thing inside of a class is a constructor, and it takes in temp and weather. I didn't care if you shortened it to temp or not, right? It doesn't really matter. And we make this. This refers to what? The instance of the day. Yeah. Temp. This dot weather is weather, and it says it needs a method, get description, that returns a string in the format description below. Well, I'll worry about that in a second. So how do I make a method? Yeah, right. I have to make a function called get description. Well, is it just description? I think just get description, right? Why is it not showing up? Well, whatever. Highlight kind of fun thing I saw for this was somebody returned this as an array, which is technically incorrect for this, but the way they handled it in the next problem is like to turn it back into a string, and so they were still able to pass all the specs. So that was a really creative solution. Although it was slightly incorrect, it was still kind of fun to see. Awesome workaround. Okay, so it needs to follow this format. So I'm just gonna like take that and return it I'm going to change these double quotes to be backticks. Instead of it being 80, I'm going to just do this dot temp. And instead of it being sunny, I will just do this dot weather. Make sense? Right, that's how we can do, it's called string interpolation, a specific name for it. If you were to have to talk through this problem and this is what you wrote, you would call that string interpolation. Write a function called getAllDayDescriptions that takes in an array of day objects. So something I saw in quite a few others was this. It's we created another method called getAllDayDescriptions. So close, but this problem is actually talking about creating a new function called getAllDayDescriptions that took in an array. And it wants us to, and that array is day objects. So I saw a couple other people create new day objects inside of this. So they keyed into it and got the day, like got the temperature and the weather, and then created a new instance and used that. Although they still passed all the specs, right? We actually already had a day, an instance of day. So we don't need to create a new one here. We just need to return a new array. What's the right array method for this? Map, right? Because this is, again, map's doing all that work for us already. So we can just do an implicit return of map, and I'll say day, if it is a day, and I'll say day.getDescription, because we've already built that method in the last one. We can go down here and uncomment up the tests. And when we run it, all the tests passed. This is what a 100% test essentially would look like. Not too bad, yeah? Questions on it? Yeah, Maria. Okay, fair. So Maria said that for the first question she thought she had to use is NaN. So turns out you don't actually have to, because NaN mod 2 does not equal 1. You could solve this problem checking, and a lot of people did, where they did check if number is NaN. So they would say, is it not NaN, and is it equal to 1 or something? But you can actually get away with just having it like that. That's a good question. Any other questions? No? Yeah, Fowler. How does the string turn into a number? Oh, yeah. So you're talking about if we do this, whoops, node, and we say 3 modulo 2. Yeah. Yeah, that's a weird spec.
Which is why I wrote so much code. So when I did, and I converted it to a number, then I couldn't pass the NaN one, it turned it into null, and that's how I ended up with the NaN check, because it passed everything that we got there.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, there was definitely a little bit of a trickiness to this question. Why is it converting it? It's just like one of those JavaScript quirks. It will do anything to work. It's like this: true equal to double equal to 1 is true. Like it's probably doing a type conversion. Ashia.
Question 3.
Yep. Disembowel?
Yeah.
Yes.
How would we have used a regular for loop, like the let I equal 0, I less than string that means?
Sure.
Because I got to the line 28, like I put
I would do it like this. Let I equal to 0. While I is less than string dot I plus plus. Whoops. And then I can say let character equal string at oops, string at I. That's the only change I'd have to make. If you don't want me to create character there, you can just mentally swap out everywhere it says char with string at I. We were like really close on that one, I think, right? Yeah, I remember that. Super close. Any other questions about this test? No? Okay, cool. I'm going to stop that recording for that one.